Kia ora and good morning, everyone. Today I'm communicating with you of an exceptionally important issue for not only you, but essentially the whole human race. This is in relation to the deployment of extremely powerful frequency technologies across the whole of New Zealand, in cities, towns and villages, and across New Zealand's rural sector. And this is a 5th generation telephone network that has been scaled up from the current 4th generation system. And there have been many highly qualified engineers, professors, doctors and technicians who have come out and stated that this technology is dangerous, especially to babies, infants, children and humans in general, but it also includes pets like cats and dogs, as well as bird life and insects. And so we're here today in the studio here in Auckland to be able to share our knowledge so that we can work towards having a 5G free New Zealand. So kia ora Katherine.
Kia ora Tim.
Kia ora David and kia ora John. I'm glad you showed up because we need to make a stand. So I'm old-fashioned, ladies before gentlemen. Katherine, thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Tim. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'd like to start by introducing the topic of 5G. We've got a bit of a hybrid beast for what's been proposed as a 5G system in New Zealand. Essentially, the government, and when I say the government, essentially it seems to be the government going along with what the industry wants, is from what the research and that's available online in terms of communications from government agencies, plus submissions from telecommunications companies. It's a kind of a hybrid beast. It's going to, if it goes ahead, use the existing 4G system as what they are calling a control layer for additional frequencies. Now, the additional frequencies will include microwave frequencies, and there's a proposal to use what's known as C-band radiation, which is around about 3.5 gigahertz or 3,500 megahertz. Just to give you an idea of what sort of radiation we're talking about, a microwave oven radiates 2.45 gigahertz. So it's a little bit more higher frequency in terms of more cycles per second than a microwave oven, one of the frequencies they want to add.
More intense and more penetrating.
Well, a faster wavelength, basically. And that's a part of the urban system that they're proposing. Another part of the urban system, and what has gotten large numbers of people with technical knowledge and scientific background with relation to the science of how electromagnetic radiation and electromagnetic fields affect human health, is the fact that they plan to use what is known as millimetre waves as part of a 5G system. Now, millimetre waves are called millimetre waves literally because they have a very short wavelength, and in the millimetres, literally, and they vibrate even faster than microwaves. So the frequency initially being looked at is in the 28 gigahertz range. So remember, the microwave oven is about 2.45 gigahertz. So you're talking about something which is 10 times that, although it doesn't quite compute in terms of the wavelength, in terms of the maths. Now, the problem with millimetre waves is that they vibrate extremely fast. They don't travel very far. And from a practical point of view, that means that infrastructure that relies on using millimetre waves as a carrier for information, the cells, they're calling them small cells, to deliver millimetre wave radiation to, say, a 5G capable cellular phone, need to be very close together. The maximum distance they will be able to travel at the power radiation that would be allowed would be about 250 metres. So they're talking in the States about infrastructure going in sort of in the range of about every sort of 2 to 10 households. Obviously it depends on the size of the section. And because millimetre waves don't travel very far, and the wavelength is so short, they are vulnerable to being disrupted by ordinary urban infrastructure, such as buildings, such as trees that have leaves. And for that reason, you potentially look at these 5G small cells producing millimetre waves being installed potentially even closer together than every 250 metres in order to take into account that transmission conditions may not be perfect. So that's a sort of a little bit of a technical background for people who like the tech side of it. What's happened on an international level is that there is a massive pushback on the 5G system, and that's for a couple of reasons. First of all, as I said, there's going to be microwave radiation used as part of the 5G plus the millimetre wave radiation. Now, the system hasn't been tested. It's like cellular phones. Cellular phones did not undergo pre-market testing. They were just marketed, and unfortunately, it's turned out, we've got good research from animal data and human studies that show increased risks of cancer from using mobile phones, for example, and also cordless phones, which also use microwave radiation frequencies. So that's one of the reasons that the scientific and medical community are concerned about 5G, is the microwave radiation component of it. And that's come especially to the fore because of a recent study that was published just late last year, the work of the National Toxicology Program in the United States, which exposed rats to microwave radiation frequencies and found an excess of cancer in those rats. So essentially we have a technology which is using a form of radiation which is already known to be carcinogenic. It is classified as a possible carcinogen at this stage, but based on the new research come out of the National Toxicology Program plus another paper that recently came out of Italy, there are calls essentially for microwave radiation alone to be categorised as a class 1. It is as a proven carcinogen. That hasn't happened officially, but it's probably only a matter of time because unfortunately it's not just people who are using devices themselves that are vulnerable to cancer as a result of exposure to microwave radiation. There is evidence of increased cancer rates in people living close to infrastructure that produces microwave radiation, such as cellular phone towers. So that's independent of whatever technology they may choose to use in their own homes, such as a Wi-Fi router, which, going back to our original discussion, the Wi-Fi router is basically like taking the microwave radiation out of a microwave oven and putting it on your desk. It's not a high enough power level to cook you the way you could boil an egg in a very short time in a microwave oven, but it causes cellular damage nonetheless. Through indirect mechanisms, it can cause DNA damage, and that's one of the reasons that we have this cancer association with exposure to microwave radiation. So you take a technology such as 5G, which proposes to use a microwave radiation, which we already know to be at least possibly carcinogenic, probably a proven carcinogen if you look at the whole body of the research. The possible carcinogenicity rating was given based on the research which was available in 2011, so it's somewhat out of date now. And then you want to, as the telcos want to do, add to that already toxic or known toxic radiation, more radiation which has been insufficiently tested for human health effects. But what data there is on the health effects from being exposed to millimetre wave radiation is not good. You're looking at a form of radiation that interacts with the skin and with other structures which are close to the surface of the body, such as the eyes. And there's animal test data showing changes in the lenses of rabbits exposed to millimetre waves, consistent with predisposition to cataracts after only a couple of months' worth of exposure, for example. And I see that as a significant concern, where if people buy themselves a 5G capable phone and they're watching videos on it, or they are using it on a speakerphone, holding it in front of their face and talking into it to try to reduce the radiation going to their brain because of the brain tumour risk from the microwaves, well, unfortunately, they may be going to give themselves cataracts if they do that, or other as yet unknown potential effects from being exposed simultaneously to millimetre waves plus microwaves from those devices. The other thing about millimetre waves, and this has gotten a lot of people who don't necessarily have a scientific background pretty upset is the fact that millimetre waves have been exploited by the US military as a weapon. They have a name for it. It's called active denial. You can look it up if you want online, and there's plenty of videos which show reporters who were somehow naive enough to sign waivers, health waivers, and stand in front of this beam of very powerful millimetre wave radiation. And you can see them being in front of this beam for about 2 to 3 seconds before they sort of involuntarily yelp and jump out of the way. Apparently it feels like sticking your head in a scalding oven. It's, sort of a reflex that you get out of the way. It's considered to be a non-lethal weapon. I'm putting non-lethal in sort of proverbial inverted commas here, because if you couldn't get out of the way of that beam, you would, and it's 2 metre wide beam, you would in a very short time get third degree burns to the whole exposed side of your body. And so if you think of it just being the front of your body, that's 50% of your surface area of your body, and that's quite likely to be fatal unless you had access to specialised burns treatment unit. And even then, there's the likelihood of fatality from infection or complications and so on and so forth. So it's not a good technology. You can understand why nobody who knows anything about millimetre wave radiation actually wants to have a millimetre wave radiation transmitter near their home. And unfortunately, as the law and regulations are currently in New Zealand, as long as a device that is designed to emit microwave radiation and also millimetre wave radiation, because they're governed by the same standard here in New Zealand, which is called NZS 2772.1 1999. They're governed by the same standard that they allow for millimetre wave radiation, 10 million microwatts per square metre on a continuous basis. Because there hasn't been any pre-market testing, we don't know how long you could expose a person to that level of radiation before they became ill. It's much lower than what will cause the burning sensation within 2 or 3 seconds than what's being used in active denial. And the frequency in terms of the millimetre waves that they plan to use in New Zealand initially is a bit lower. I said, around the 28 gigahertz. But they haven't ruled out the use of higher frequencies later as 5G evolves. And if 5G is allowed to evolve, what will probably happen is that more and more frequencies will be allowed to be exploited, because essentially we have a situation where the government allows companies such as cellular phone companies to put up infrastructure like cellular phone towers to be able to legally irradiate people living around that infrastructure to a level which is far higher than what research shows health effects can begin at. And the same thing, unfortunately, will go for millimetre wave radiation if 5G is allowed to proceed. The standards, although we don't know at the moment, what level of millimetre wave will do what damage, because it's essentially an experimental technology, the standard is very lax for millimetre wave, just as it is for microwave radiation. And I think we can predict that people will be harmed by it. In fact, there are already reports from the USA where 5G technology is being installed in 5 cities that people are suffering horrendous consequences as from being exposed to 5G infrastructure in their area. And we're talking about symptoms that are consistent with the sort of radiation to which they're exposed, such as burning skin sensations, inability to regulate their body temperature. And that is backed up by research done in Israel, which showed that the sweat I think it's the sweat gland. Is that right, David? Yeah. So that's backed up. That's backed up by researchers done in Israel, which showed that the sweat duct and gland essentially act as a sort of an antenna for these millimetre and or sub-millimetre wave frequencies. So if you can cause dysfunction in your ability of your body to cool itself, you're going to get heat build up in the skin and potentially very nasty effects from that. And people are sort of experiencing either sort of hypothermia hypothermia type symptoms, and some cases excessive sweating as well from, I guess, overstimulation of that particular bit of biology because of the resonance of the wavelength. So probably the easiest way of explaining it.
And that's very dangerous for the elderly and the young that the hypothalamus isn't fully operational and they can't control their heat regulatory systems properly.
That's right. But some of the reports coming in, this potentially could affect people of all ages.
Definitely.
And so, David, as a health scientist and particularly a nutritional biochemist, what is your insight about this dangerous technology?
Well, it is dangerous, and I've spoken to my IT manager at work who thought it was all a lot of BS. And I said, well, unfortunately, you need to educate yourself, and that's why I'm on air today, because this was brought to my attention by Katherine and Jon a while ago. I'd read a few articles and thought, this doesn't look very good at all. Then, about 2 months ago, one of my mentors in the US where I trained, did my master's, Dr. Gabriel Cousins, who's an integrative medical doctor out of Arizona. I'll give you a bit of background on Gabriel. He's no fly-by-nighter. This guy is a major force in natural medicine in the United States. He was the man that cured diabetes 1, 2, and 3 with a raw vegan diet back in the late 80s and 90s, documented scientifically. And so he revolutionized nutrition and its use in medical systems for diabetics. Now, he doesn't come on air very often. He put a YouTube clip on, say a couple of months ago, and there'll be links to this on our Facebook page and website we'll talk about in a minute. And he fundamentally said that at that point, 5G was being rolled out to 11 cities in the US. 5 have got more saturation. The other 6 are working on it. And he's linked with these top medical doctors working in these integrated health clinics. For those of you that understand, integrated means doctors that have studied both natural medicine and orthodox medicine and are starting to practice more an integrated approach. So they're more holistic in their approach.
Yes.
And what he discovered, to his alarm, was that the health stats were mirroring the rollout of 5G in the cities of massive increases in diabetes, which of course he has a special interest in, neuroendocrine cancers, particularly brain cancers and nervous system neuromas, problems with ADD, ADHD, the list goes on. And that'll be detailed on our website and Facebook pages as well. Well, I'll be blogging and Katherine and others will be blogging as well. So you'll get to see this information in quite a bit of detail. And this is not hocus pocus. There is scientific evidence for all of what we're saying, and it is darned scary, to be honest. When you understand the intensity of the microwave that has to be created inside a cube, if you like, of 4 transmitters to carry the frequencies, the intensity is up several levels of magnitude over a 4G network for 5G to work properly. So in order for the telcos to claim and to deliver that they can give you much faster, quicker, cheaper broadband to any mobile device, which is what 5G is all about, then you have to create these very intense fields of 5G for the devices to operate within. Once you're out of that field, the 5G device can't operate nearly as well, or if at all. My concern, as is Gabriel's concern, is there has been no health studies done. And Katherine mentioned this before. There's been no real government-sponsored or independent-sponsored research done on the effects of this technology. Even 3 and 4G, before it was rolled out, there was no testing done. And still, scientists, so-called scientists who are not up with the latest in quantum physics and quantum biology are saying that there's nothing wrong with microwave radiation from cell phone towers and 3 and 4G phones, and it's just not true. And I guess they come from the angle, if you say it enough, the people will believe it. Well, I'm sorry, guys, I don't believe it because I've seen the research, I've seen the evidence, and I've seen it in my clinic. I'm a 30-year health practitioner, and I treat naturopathic oncology. That's one of the 3 fields I have in naturopathic medicine. And I see brain cancers all the time. And there was 5 lawsuits in the United States last century, in the 1990s, where Motorola settled out of court for millions of dollars with 5 people. 3 were real estate agents and 2 were lawyers. Or it might have been the other way around, 3 lawyers and 2 real estate agents. Anyway, the shape and size of the tumor was the exact shape of the areole over the ear they held the phone on. And there was conclusive evidence that the cell phone caused cancer. If you hold it up against your head long enough, you'll get localized heat effects, which have been proven from thermograms that I've seen. We've got various shielding technologies that we utilize in the clinic to prevent this. And of course, the best form of prevention is not to use the technology. Now, that's not an option for me. I'm not a high-tech Luddite. I love the technology. I've got a smartphone here in front of me on flight mode now. I use technology all the time. I've got one of the most high-tech clinics in New Zealand. But it has to be safe. This technology is not safe. I want to see studies. I want to see 2-year rollouts of a technology with animal studies, with human studies, with cell studies to prove this technology is safe, which it will fail abysmally as it stands right now. Now, a couple of points I want to make before I hand it on to someone else. We have at the moment 4.5G technologies being rolled out, which is a modification of 4G. Everywhere where 4G antenna go up, the antennas are about 2 meters high. They're quite big. The 5G antenna are about half a meter high, and they're put inside 4G antennas. So you can't see them as a separate structure. They're put inside now. So everywhere where there's 4G technology, they're putting 5G inside them, ready to roll out the infrastructure. But as Katherine rightly pointed out, the frequencies don't carry very far. So you need base stations that retransmit the signal every 250 meters. That means in a city-urban environment, you basically need a 5G antenna on every street corner to saturate the urban environment, because 5G won't go penetrate buildings, but it will penetrate biological systems. It'll penetrate your pet, your mother, your sister, your wife, your husband. All living biological systems will allow 5G through it. And it is very, very dangerous because of the cell mutations, the potential for DNA telomere breakage, etc., etc., etc. So that's my main concern and my main reason for coming on air today.
Mothers and babies and pregnant women too. Extremely important.
And for the animal rights activists out there, pets, animals, birds, we don't know the effects. Birds could fall out of the sky. We don't know. We haven't done the testing. The testing needs to be done as a baseline before any of this technology is allowed out by governmental authorities, WHO and all the other organizations that are supposed to be governing our health and are really ignoring this and allowing the telco companies to do as they please.
Yes, as an ex-beekeeper, I understand bees are important as well. And Jon, you've been working with Uncensored magazine for nearly 15 years, and you too have an understanding that you want to be able to share to really mobilise New Zealanders, mobilise our planet to take action.
Would that it was that easy.
I agree.
What we have seen now for many, many decades, if not longer, is a total assault on logic, a total assault on the human ability to think clearly, a total assault on our ability to think independently. The fact that we as a species have been so dumbed down and controlled has meant that the corporations have gained control over the regulatory agencies, which supposedly were set up to regulate the very agencies that we're talking about, regulate the various companies we're talking about today. There is not one serious technology that has been introduced in this last 100 years or so that I can think of, with this possible exception of the copper-based telephone system, that hasn't been completely deleterious to human health. And the reason is that our governments, which we have basically acceded to, have been responsive to the corporations that are bringing in these harmful technologies rather than to the people that they supposedly are there to protect from these technologies. So it's been a rollout constantly to basically put profits over people, as Penny Bright used to say.
Yes.
God bless him.
Agreed.
What we're seeing now with this particular technology is it's the apotheosis of a long chain of decisions that have been made to basically harm the human ecology and we're paying the price. We're paying the price in terms of a cancer epidemic, and it is an epidemic now. We're paying the price in terms of an autism epidemic, and that is an epidemic, and it's directly attributable to the pharmaceutical establishment.
The diabetes epidemic.
The diabetes epidemic, thank you very much. What we have here is a system that is based on harming, killing people.
For profit.
For profit, for power.
And for control.
And we have given up our rights. We have given up our abilities to think and to act rationally. And we have been dumbed down and put to sleep. And now I think it's time to wake up, because they've pushed the human race to the wall, Tim. And they're counting on the fact that people are so dumbed down and so asleep, thank you, fluoride, that we are now unable to act. And they're taking advantage of it. And the logical conclusion is, if you want to extrapolate, is more of the same until they have a cancer epidemic that wipes out billions of us.
I hear you very clearly, John, because we have a swath of people from 25 years to 55 years of age who know nothing about this. I'm talking to people in their 40s and 50s. What about 5G? Huh?
Mm-hmm. They're
not even getting it. So somewhere along the line, the social media have basically, deleted this conversation. Yeah. And I'm really concerned around this, that the fact that so many people are blissfully unaware, as you say, comfortably numb. Mm. And so, again, thank you for drawing us to this important attention that essentially, delete the hard drive of every human being. Mm. Katherine?
Look, those are very good points. I could just speak to the points that John has made in terms of corporations influencing the regulations and laws that govern electromagnetic radiation in New Zealand. There's on 5g.org.nz within the next day or two, there's going to be a piece that specifically examines that topic, because I think it's very important. I mentioned before the standard for electromagnetic radiation that covers the microwave range frequencies and up into the very high frequency radiation known as the millimetre wave radiation for New Zealand, and it's named good old NZS 2772.1 1999, which, and if you look at the history of how that regulation was developed, it becomes crystal clear one of the reasons why it's so lax in terms of allowing radiation levels many times higher than the levels at which health effects and adverse biological effects can occur. And essentially, the people who put that regulation together came from the telecommunications industry, broadcasting, again, obviously exploiting the electromagnetic spectrum. There was some local government input, if I remember correctly. Now, most local government bureaucrats are not health experts, and
not scientists either.
That's right.
Not ecologists.
No, exactly.
Or biologists.
Right. Exactly right.
Or thinkers.
If I'm recalling correctly, there was one person who was a medical doctor. So even if they had significant concerns, they were obviously sort of outvoted and outgunned. And
Outmoneyed.
well, quite potentially, that's right. And so that happened, that standard went through in 1999. And then in 2008, unfortunately, one of the last things that Helen Clark's Labour-led government did was to create a working group that developed what's known as the National Environmental Standard for Telecommunications Facilities. So, it kind of gets abbreviated, and you see it in documents as NESTF, a bit of a mouthful. So we'll just call it the NES because it's easier, National Environmental Standard. Now, essentially what that standard did was give the telecommunications industry basically pretty much a free ride to put up infrastructure virtually anywhere that they wanted to, as long as the emissions from that infrastructure conformed with good old NZS 2772.1 1999. And the people who developed this National Environmental Standard for our telecommunications facilities in New Zealand, surprise, surprise, were mostly drawn from the telecommunications industry and sort of allied industries such as broadcasting, if I recall correctly. And if I'm making a few minor factual errors here, they'll all be corrected with references in the post that's going to go up on 5g.org.nz. So you have the fox guarding the hen house.
What you're describing here is a perfect definition for corruption.
Yes. That's right.
And it is seated and thriving throughout the political system of much of the world, including New Zealand now.
Unfortunately,
the question becomes, what can we people do about it?
Okay. I think the first thing is to realise, that the NZS 2772.1 1999, it's always being cited by companies that are responsible for polluting the environment with these forms of electromagnetic radiation as being a safety standard or a New Zealand standard.
Right.
And that's right, it is a crock. But if you are a normal person and don't realise that the standard was basically created at the behest of the industry to allow unsafe levels of emissions, economically viable levels of emissions rather than emissions based on human health and environmental and genuine environmental concerns.
There's nobody there in government.
There isn't anybody in government, but the first thing is for ordinary people to realise that it's not a safety standard. It's a commercial standard. It's an allowable pollution standard. And once people realise that, it's a game changer, I think, because if you think that your cell phone or thought that your cell phone was safe because it was sold in New Zealand, you can think again. If you think that it's safe to have a cell phone tower outside your house because it conforms to the the NZS 1999, you can think again. If you think it's safe, and companies in the electricity industry are always trying to tell people that it's safe to have a smart meter on the wall of their house, if regardless where it is, whether it's on the wall of their baby's bedroom or wherever, because it conforms with this so-called
safety standard.
That's right, and it is a crock, and that is the first thing people need to know. And once you realise the safety standard is a crock, and the government
has been lying to you.
Yeah, that's right. And has basically allowed corporations involved in creating this pollution to set the standard. Then you say to yourself, well, do I want these wireless devices in my life? Should I be maximising their use because I think they're safe, or should I be minimising their use because the research The scientific research is saying that they're not safe. I think anybody who actually cares about their health and their family's health will be, going for minimising the use of wireless devices.
Exactly.
Well, let me jump in here.
Yeah.
All right. We were all in agreement that the system has sold us out. The problem is that there are so many people, including the gentleman to my right, who find the technology to be absolutely crucial to their jobs, their business, their, the communications, right? That they have been able to sneak this stuff in under the guise of convenience,
Yes.
business and other necessity, enjoyment. And now I can download some bloody movie in 3 seconds flat.
That's the promise of 5G, isn't
yeah,
it? That
that's
you
the
can download a film faster than you could watch it.
Right, okay. So, to my mind, one of the ways that you stop this in its tracks is for people not to use it.
Absolutely. And if you look, Spark has published on its website essentially what their version is, or their vision is for New Zealand's future in terms of what they want for their 5G roadmap. And you can see from a graph presented on that site that the demand for wireless data has been rising exponentially.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And
which is part of the business plan, of course.
It is part of the business plan.
But as with GE Free New Zealand, which was, at least up until now, more than partially successful.
No, it's still successful in terms of holding off commercial
Absolutely.
growing. We're one of the few countries outside of Europe where that's been achieved.
So New Zealand, the light unto the nations, could be the first country on the planet to say no to 5G.
I don't think New Zealand's going to be the first. From what I'm hearing, the San Francisco Bay Council passed a resolution to create the world's first 5G free zone in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Mill Valley.
Yes, Mill Valley. And it's happening around Europe as well. There's a lot of other active groups who are starting to wake people up and say, hey guys, wake up, this technology is not as it's supposed to be, blah-de-blah-de-blah. All the stuff you're hearing from us now. So, we're connecting with these groups. There's a global campaign over time to stop this technology. Now, I'm not, as I said before, a technological Luddite. I understand the use of the technology. I've got a teenage son who can't stay off the darn thing.
He's addicted, and we know that Apple and Microsoft and Facebook and other companies have been impregnating addictive qualities into this technology. There's been documentaries on it for Africa. You'd have to be a rock under a stone somewhere in the middle of nowhere, a lizard under a stone, I should say. That's better.
That's not reading this information. Gaming technology is highly addictive by its nature. The other thing that Katherine mentioned, which I want to highlight here, is the US military has weaponized this form of 5G. It can be used as a weapon. My concern is, take a scenario where 5G is in an urban environment. You go to a concert, you're in the mosh pit. Not that I ever go to concerts in the mosh pit. But anyway, if you did, and you had 20 people around you with smartphones, and they're all taking pictures and beaming it to their mates, and you happen to be between their phones and the 5G antenna, guess what? Their 20 beams is going to go through your body to get to the antenna. So you're being exposed, whether you like it or not, with or without your consent, you are being exposed to very high, dangerous, cellular altering, DNA fracturing, telomere shortening technology. That is not a good thing. That's what's causing the massive rise in neuroendocrine cancers, skin cancers, brain cancers, any sensitive neural tissue that's sensitive enough to pick up and be damaged by these frequencies, which is basically all of you. Now, we know there's a concept in health called EHS, electrohypersensitivity, the canary in the cage. These are people and it's rising rapidly. Used to be 1%. It's probably a lot higher now. Katherine may have the latest stats on this. EHS is rising rapidly in our population as we roll out more of this technology and we get more overexposed to it. Now, 200 years ago, we had zero microwave radiation contact except from solar radiation from the sun, okay? And the odd supernovaed star billions of light years away that will eventually reach us, okay? So that radiation was all we were exposed to. Now we're being saturated in urban environments with 100 digital TVs, 100 digital radio stations, at least 3 cell phone networks, Vodafone, Spark, and 2G, and 2 Degrees, and on it goes. So not only us, it's not only humans that are being radiated, it's our pets, our animals, our agriculture. And what's the effect on plants? We don't know. What's the effect on insects? We don't know.
We do know.
We do?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And absolutely.
Please enlighten me further.
This is not an experiment. They know full well what it does. Mm-hmm. Okay? Whenever I hear people saying, well, we're part of an uncontrolled experiment, that's not true.
Uncontrolled.
Mm-hmm. They know full well what the deleterious, that means harmful effects of this radiation are.
Yeah.
What I said before about New Zealand possibly becoming the first country in the world that says no to this technology still stands. Mill Valley has engendered, the decision in Mill Valley has engendered a reaction from the dark side, Tim.
Yes.
And this reaction is to make it illegal for any township or county or city to stop it. The big boys foresaw this event happening, the reaction of the people happening, and they have paid off their minions in law-making positions. This is not the GE-free example could and should and must be taken before it becomes illegal for towns and people to say no.
Yeah.
And GE-free Northland has been a sterling example of this.
Yes.
And we could replicate their work. And if we start now, that means for many of us, and I'm not a Luddite, okay? I hate this.
Never said you were.
You said
Never
that
said you were.
You said you weren't.
I said I'm not.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Luddites were right, and they've been given a bad name because the technologies that they were opposed to were very, very harmful. And still, what we got, 10 minutes?
Yep.
The Luddites have been given a bad name, but today's Luddite would be people who say, no more cell phone, keep the landline. I'm going to become an example of what I'm talking about. And neither Katherine nor I carry cell phones except for emergencies in the car. That's it. Yeah. Reach us on the landline, leave a message like you used to.
Yeah.
Now, can I cut in for a second? Doctors. People say, why don't doctors talk out about this and stop that? All doctors are gagged. They cannot go against the system because the medical umbrella over them will cut them off. I know about only 3 independent doctors in this country.
Yeah.
And then dentists are the same. Dentists won't speak out against fluoride.
Right.
And then if you have
or mercury amalgams.
That's
or
right.
root canals.
And and then if you go through the system, water scientists will not really speak out against the poisoning of the water or 1080.
Yeah. Because they've got a vested interest.
Yeah.
And so
nobody has a vested interest in their own life. How interesting is that?
The professionals in our society, the academics and the intellectuals of our society, we cannot depend on them.
No. Which is why it has to be a grassroots movement.
Thank you.
And this grassroots movement has already started. So it's like, get on the bandwagon, because if you don't, your very life is at stake.
Well, your brain cells are going to be toast, and the ones that are being affected most are the millennials. I've got a teenage son. He's using the technology all the time. People are not using the technology with any understanding of the health consequences. And I mean, unfortunately, John, you're not going to stop technology's movement forwards in time. However, it has to be safe. We have to have safeguards in place. If the technology
is not safe, and you got to stop.
Well, hang on a minute. So we need to look at other technologies that are safe. Okay.
Yeah, there are people working on that.
Yeah, exactly. So we need to invent a 6G that doesn't have localized heating effects, that doesn't use this dangerous millimetre wave frequency radiation of microwave. We've got the technology at our disposal to do this. We've got the brains to do this. What I'm interested in is that the reasoning behind this rollout, who's really behind us, who's the master puppeteer that's wanting to devastate humanity deliberately and be paid for doing it? That's a very interesting question.
The control issues. John's smiling. I'll come back to you, John, so you can eclipse that one. Catherine?
Eclipse that one.
Well, I mean, I can't answer, the question, who is the ultimate puppeteer?
No, I'm asking you just jump in.
Jump in.
Try answer David's question. It's a good question.
I think there's a confluence of issues here. First of all, you've got the government's kowtowing to the telecommunications industry and giving them a free pass. Mm-hmm. And because the telecommunications industry is considered to be so important by the government because of the fact that people get addicted to devices like cell phones and so on and use more and more data for which they're paying, and obviously, that's creating employment and contributing to the tax base. The government hasn't put it together yet that the health costs for microwave radiation related conditions are going to probably bankrupt the health system, and
Yes.
And the monies that have come in from people using wireless technologies when they could have been using something safe like copper or fibre into the government coffers in terms of taxes aren't going to cut it.
Just like big tobacco and alcohol.
That's right. Just like big tobacco, that we'll call it big wireless. They've been funding studies, designed to show that there's no problem, just the way that big tobacco funded phony baloney studies that gave tobacco a clean bill of health.
They're doing the same with wireless technology.
Exactly. So you've got a situation where consumers are confused, and because they're confused, they think, well, the technology's great, it's convenient, it's kind of like magic having this video. You can sort of download it to my phone with the press of a button. It's okay. If it were dangerous, there'd be some sort of warning on it, like there is on the cigarette
packets,
pack. But there's no warning, so people assume that it's safe, and because they assume that it's safe, they consume more data. The industry gets more powerful.
Hang on a minute, Catherine. There actually are warnings. If you buy a brand new iPhone or a Samsung or whatever your mobile device is, and you read the little booklet that comes with it, the fine print, it's clearly stated, don't hold this device against your head, and it gives you specific warnings that are enforced by federal law in the United States.
It's all in 3-point type.
It's in very small print.
That's right.
And who reads the manual anyway?
That's right. By the time you've ruined your eyes staring at a smartphone or a computer screen for 5 or 10 or 20 years, you probably can't read that fine print.
So they've ticked the box where they've warned people, right? Yeah, right.
That's right. I've got to say the other problem is,
legal problem.
Earlier in this discussion, I mentioned how the New Zealand Safety Standard, NZ is 2772.1 1999, and our National Environmental Standard for Telecommunications facilities were basically, to summarise it very briefly, creations of people in the telecommunications industry.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, the government is still taking health advice about the effects of microwave radiation from a committee in which the person who has the most influence is a consultant to the electricity industry and the telecommunications industry.
And
he's done
paid
things
by them.
Yeah, that's right. For example, he's done things such as test the emissions from a smart meter to see if they comply with NZS 2772.1 1999. Of course they do.
We're all going to know that number off by heart by then.
Of course they do. The emissions do comply, because if the emissions didn't comply, the smart meter couldn't be marketed. But again, so this is being used as proof that a device that's
the bench standard for safety.
That can cause adverse health effects in people who are sensitive and or who have got higher exposures because of where the smart meter's placed within their home. So that's, he's the person who's applied the data that, proves that device is quote unquote safe. And he's also the person who has provided, data attesting to the fact that emissions from urban cellular phone infrastructure is safe. And he's the person providing health advice, or the key person within the committee that's supposed to be assessing the...
So there's corruption there at a base level. Can you name this person?
Yes, I can.
Would you like to?
Why not? His name's Martin Gledhill.
Martin Gledhill. And where is he based?
Somewhere in the South Island, I believe. He has a Master of Science degree in what's termed to be health physics.
Right.
I mean, he has good quality equipment. As far as I know, he's generally competent in terms of assessing, making radiation assessment.
Okay, so we've got a serious problem here where there's vested corporate interest that's involved in regulating it. It's the classic fox in charge of the hen house. I come back to my question. I'd like to hear Jon's comments briefly. Who's the master puppeteer behind this? If they've known the technology's dangerous and they're rolling it out to subvert people thinking and erode health, why? What's the game?
How much time do I have?
You have got 6 minutes exactly.
We can wrap it up in 3.
Okay.
We tend to think of puppeteers and puppets. We don't tend to think of being our own puppeteer and our own puppet at the same time. We don't tend to think of where our opinions come from. We don't tend to think of, self-critically, all right? And this is a condition that the human race has been subjected to for millennia. I ran a quote here from a brilliant man named Chris Hedges, in which he says, "We now live in a nation where doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, the press destroys information, religion destroys morals, and banks destroy the economy."
Wise man.
He is, and he nailed it. If you want to dig deep historically or go back as far as ancient Egypt, you can come up with various negative influences on the human race designed to keep us enslaved. And I've done a lot of that work.
You have.
But that's not the issue. Of course, there are negative forces in the universe that are operating on this planet. To not see that is really to keep yourself under that proverbial rock that David mentioned.
Head in the sand, ostrich mentality.
But that's not really the issue, who's at the top of this particular pyramid. Whoever it is at the top of this particular pyramid, we have incorporated the attitudes that we are slaves into our own lives.
Yeah.
And follow the leader, comfort zone kind of thinking, where we've got to the point now where anything that it makes us feel uncomfortable in terms of concepts, ideas, etc., is rejected, because we have acceded to the notion that what's most important is our comfort rather than our lives and the lives of the entire ecology. This is the challenge. Whoever is or whatever is on the top of the pyramid is not material. What is material is for us to wake the flock up.
Yeah. Great. And can I just give a plug for the website? If you want to find out more information about us, want to see stuff in writing, want to look at the references and the scientific information, please go to www.5g.org.nz. We're setting up a Facebook page this week, 5G Free New Zealand, and we'd love to have you involved. We'd love to have you like the Facebook page when it's set up, share it with your friends, spread it far and wide. Look, it's the young people I'm concerned about, our kids and our grandchildren, because if we don't stop this kind of assault on us, we're not going to have great grandchildren. And I'm being deadly serious here. Now, to quote my friend Dr. Gabriel Cousins, the 5G rollout infrastructure around the world is as dangerous as nuclear weapons. That's how bad it is. And we've only just touched the surface. Now, no, to many of you that sounds really extreme, but over the next few weeks, we're going to give you the information, the references, the science behind it, so you can see what we're saying is real and true. Please educate yourself.
Yeah, thank you very much, guys. This is extremely important. Nuclear free New Zealand, 5G free New Zealand.
Yay.
It's really important because our future depends on it. Everybody, because many people are getting cancer now.
1 in 2 by 2020.
15%.
It can only increase if we're in this microwave oven that we are under attack. So I'd like to say, Katherine, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim.
David, cheers, brother.
Thank you, Tim.
And John, love you, man. Thank you very much.
Jimmy.
And thank you, people, for giving up your time again to draw attention to yet another issue that will affect people's lives. Cheers. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Kia ora.
Power to the people.